Commodore fans, are you ready? It's time for another episode of the Vandy247 podcast on the 440 Sports Network. Keep it locked right here for the best Vanderbilt coverage. Whether it's Clark Lee on the gridiron, Mark Byington and Shea Ralph on the hardwood, or Tim Corbin on the diamond, the Vandy247 crew has you covered. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do. Also, like this video and subscribe to the YouTube channel. That's free and easy to do. Follow the crew on Twitter, Apple Podcast, and Spotify for podcast episodes. Lastly, if you're interested in sponsoring the show, email Chris Lee at chrislee70@gmail.com. And now, pull up a chair. It's time for another episode of the Vandy247 podcast.
Good morning, Commodore fans. Welcome into Vandy247 Live on a cold Monday morning here in Nashville. I'm your host, Billy Derrick. Today, we're going to be joined by Tim Thompson, Vanderbilt basketball color analyst there on the Learfield Sports Network. You can hear him with Kevin Ingram every game, 30 minutes before every game as well on 102.5 The Game and 94.9 The Fan. So we'll talk all things Vanderbilt basketball with Tim Thompson. We'll talk about Saturday's loss in Knoxville. We'll take a peek at Kentucky on Wednesday. Cats could be without a couple of guards that might help Vanderbilt. So we'll get into that and, of course, talk about the schedule down the stretch. We'll talk a little baseball after Tim, and then Michaela Blake's. And I want to get Tim's take on this, too. 55 points yesterday, broke her own record. So we've got a lot to get to today on this Monday. Before we do, though, I want to tell you about the Wash House. Are you dreading laundry day? Is it stealing time to do the things that you truly enjoy? Well, let the professionals at the Wash House take care of that for you. They've got 2 locations in Nashville. Just drop off your dirty laundry, and their professional attendants can give you back the one thing you can never have enough of. That's your time. Within 24 hours, you can pick up your nicely folded, fresh and clean laundry, ready to be put away. Log on to washhouseclean.com or stop in today and get your time back. I'm going to bring in Tim Thompson now. Tim, how you doing?
I'm good. How are you doing, Billy?
Doing well. I want to start with, before we get into the men's side of things, were you able to watch yesterday Michaela Blake's performance?
No, but I was keeping track of it, on my phone. And at one time, this off the top of my head, Billy, but, I know in the third quarter, we were down like 13 points.
Yeah.
And I was like, uh-oh, this is not going to end well. And then my wife and I had to go do a couple things. And all of a sudden, I pull it back up, and they'd won in, I guess, double overtime? And
yep.
She had 55. I've always said 55 points in a college game or any game, you and me could probably go out on the court by ourselves and play in a 20, 30-minute game, and we might not get 55 with nobody guarding us, That's amazing to me that she was able to put those kind of numbers up.
Incredible. And to me, what's really impressive is on the 3 free throws, because they're down 3. She got fouled on 3 with about a second left. All 3 free throws were swishes. Didn't hit the rim, and that's in a road SEC game for a freshman. She's built from the right fibers. I thought that was really impressive for her and that team to go on the road and do that. But Tim, let's talk about the game in Knoxville. I was impressed. I mean, it's hard not to be impressed with that first half. Vanderbilt was up by 16 at one point. You knew Tennessee was going to make a run in the second half. I thought Vanderbilt weathered that for the most part. But Byington said it. You get Ziegler in those high ball screens. He really took control of the game. He had some big threes. Tough result, obviously, Tim. But, I mean, that's par for the course in the road in the SEC against a Tennessee team that was very close to being a 1 seed. And yeah. It was another one of those results where that's a road win against probably a lot of SEC teams on that performance.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you look at, I was going back on all our SEC games, and you look at Florida, we were up 2 at half. Auburn, we were up 3 early in the second half.
Mm-hmm.
Oklahoma, we were up 4 at half. And I think that's been our problem. I was going through all the SEC second half stats that we have, and right now we're giving up on average 45 points a game in the second half throughout our SEC conference schedule. And you look at Oklahoma, they scored 61 against us. I think Auburn scored 51 in the second half against us. That's where we got to be better. And Coach Byington mentioned it on the post game after the Tennessee game was, we got to get stops. We were in a situation with Auburn where we were up 3, and then their offensive efficiency was off the charts the last probably 15, 16 minutes of that game. We just couldn't get any stops. And, you're playing in a league like this, you get a couple stops, and, you look at the first half of that Tennessee game. I'm telling you, Billy, we were carving them up. I mean, it was just a clinic about how we were running our offense and, hard cuts, defense. Chris Magnon, he sets the tone early with a steal and an N1. And again, we were up 16, up 13 at half. And the one thing that I thought was detrimental to us was Tennessee had the ball coming out in the second half. They come down, miss. We get the rebound. We come down, I think, turn it over. They go down, miss. We come down, miss. They go down, miss. We go down, miss. So 6 possessions, 3 for each team, and we're up 13. And I just felt like, man, if we could have scored a couple times in those first 2 or 3 possessions to bump that lead to, 16, 18 points, then it would have been just a really uphill struggle for Tennessee, to come back. But, give Tennessee credit. I mean, Ziegler had 0 points at halftime, 0. He had 22 in the second half. And my understanding was that Barnes really challenged him at halftime. I talked to a guy that is kind of in the know with that stuff, and he challenged him, and he came out, and they were running those high ball screens, and they were getting lobs, or they were getting wide open threes. They were attacking off the wing. The one guy that jumped up that you don't really expect is Mashek. He hits 2 deep threes. Mm-hmm. One of them was in one really critical situation. And then, give Tyler Nickel credit early in the second half. He hit a couple threes to keep us up in that 10-12 range. But again, we just, down the stretch, we just couldn't get the kind of stops that you got to have in a super competitive league like this.
McLaughlin, only 2 shot attempts, only played 18 minutes, no points. I think we saw how important he is to this team. Byington talked about it after the game, saying, yeah, it's hard for us to have a ton of success. I mean, Vanderbilt was still in the game for the entirety, so it tells you how much depth they've got. But it is a different looking team when McLaughlin's not producing, Tim, and of course he fouls out, and I think that's becoming maybe a little too common with McLaughlin and Carey. It's easier said than done to avoid fouls, right? I mean, and it does seem like second half officiating is a little different than these first halves. We can get into that later, but McLaughlin, man, he's big to this team, and when he went down, I thought that played a big role. Carey was still able to produce a little bit, but man, when you're playing with 4 fouls, that's tough, Tim, and you feel like that's happening maybe one too many times here.
Yeah, and Coach Byington addressed that after the game, is that we're really a pretty solid team, really good team when we play those 2 guys together, because you got they're not 6'10", 6'11" like you got at Florida and some other schools, but they take up space. They're McLaughlin can hit threes. Carey can hit threes. Carey uses that big body down low. When those guys go out of the game as a result of fouls, then we become a different team. You're going to have, down the stretch, literally we were playing Tyler Nickel at the 5, and, you're playing against, number 5 ranked team in the country in Tennessee, and Tyler Nickel has to play the 5. That's not that's not good for the outcome of the game when, he has to play that position, because he's really more of a normal 3. He can play 4 every now and then, but When you got to play them at 5, then it's a whole different ball game in this league.
You got Kentucky on Wednesday. How do you look at this schedule here, Tim? I know there's a big one on Saturday against Ole Miss. You've got another big home game coming up against Missouri. You've got Arkansas coming in here as well. This Kentucky team feels gettable right now. And I was joking with somebody a few days ago that unless they're playing Tennessee, they seem to have Tennessee's number this year. But without Lamont Butler and Jackson Robinson, feels like a gettable Kentucky team Wednesday night. We'll see if they play or not. But, man, that'd be a big one to snag.
Yeah, it's one of those deals where, Butler, in my opinion, really is kind of the head of the snake. He's the guy that defensively, he's solid. He gets them in their offense, that kind of stuff. I just think we have a really good chance. I mean, really, we had a really good chance in Knoxville. I mean, that's one that you sit there and you think, man, we let that one get away. Gosh, that would have been a game that would have taken a lot of pressure off the team to get in the NCAA tournament, because now you've got a road win at Tennessee. This is another opportunity for us. You got a road win against a really solid, Kentucky team in Rupp Arena. And if you can get that kind of a win on the road, now all of a sudden those home games that you have with Missouri, with Arkansas, those games are critical, but at least you've got another one under your belt, because I firmly believe we were 12-1 coming out of pre-conference. If we win 8 games to get to 20 wins in this league, I don't see how they can keep us out of the NCAA tournament with the way that our schedule is, down the stretch.
Well, let me ask you this. If they get to 7 in the regular season, should the SEC tournament this year matter? Because in the past, it really hasn't. And maybe it doesn't mean a ton this year. And for Vanderbilt's case, if you play Wednesday, obviously winning that Wednesday game won't matter a ton. This would mean you'd have to win your Thursday game to get to that 8th win. And maybe it still doesn't matter. But in your mind, Tim, if they're sitting at 7 in the SEC tournament, if they get a good win in Nashville in the tournament, do you think that they should credit them?
I think they should. And I think the committee does do some of that, down the stretch. But I think the committee, and if they're smart, they look at, just like Auburn losing to Florida at home. Okay. They didn't lose their number 1 ranking because the committee or whoever basically looked at their total body of work and said, okay, these guys are really good. They lose to a really good Florida team at home. They're not going to be knocked out of being the number 1 ranked team in the country. And I think that bodes well for not just for Vanderbilt, but for everyone in the SEC, is if you can get to 7 or 8 wins, even in the regular season, and you look at that entire body of work of us being 12-1, we're 12-1. We beat Virginia Tech. We beat UNLV. We beat Seton Hall. We go on the road and beat TCU. Those are the kind of things that I think you just get to that 8 wins in the league, and now all of a sudden the committee's going to have to make a really tough decision against what I would say Vanderbilt is a really good team.
Last thing for you here, Tim. Joe has a comment here. He said they just seem to run out of juice after the half. I don't know if it's concentration or what, but the lack of being able to play some defense is concerning. You mentioned that. Byington talked about it too. Just got to find more ways to get stops. In the second half, in your mind, is it just one thing they've got to hone in on? Is it a multitude of things like in these second halves? And Byington said it too after the game. He said, look, these teams are really good. We're playing on the road. So a lot of times you just got to give credit to a team like a Tennessee on the road or Oklahoma even, or whoever else they've played on the road, Alabama, Missouri. A lot of it is the other team too. But what are the things that, like, if in this week in practice, you're Byington, what are you honing in on?
Well, and again, you make a great point, Billy. You look at a Tennessee team who was ranked number 1 in the country against the 3-point shot. Okay. And we torch them in the first half. Second half, I guarantee you Barnes crawled up those guys' hind quarters and said, we got to get after them defensively. And you got to give Tennessee a lot of credit for how they came out and I knew they were going to play physical against us. And I just think what we have to do now is we've got to play through that physicality, because when you're up 13 or you're up 4 when on the road, the opposing team's going to come out and they're going to just get up underneath you, pound you. And I will say this, you talked about the officiating. Barnes got after those 3 officials at halftime like you wouldn't believe. I mean, he was all up in their grill because he felt like Vanderbilt was, being really physical with them, which we were. And, the worm kind of turned in the second half. Now, I'm not blaming this absolutely on the officiating, but I think what Vanderbilt has to understand is when they go on the road and they're put in the position where, you're leading on the road, you better be physical. You better play through contact. You better do some things. And I think probably Coach Byington in practice now is like, he's great at special situations. And I think that probably what he's doing is he's challenging these guys, and he challenged them at halftime. He even said at the post game, he said, we challenged our guys at halftime, come back out, get after it. And, sometimes, you're talking to, 18 to 23-year-old kids, and sometimes it doesn't take effect. But the one thing that we did, in my opinion, in the first half, we never let the ball stick. We never pounded the basketball. In the second half, we started to do that a little bit, and that got our offense a little stagnant. And I think that's one of the things in the second half, as good as, I think maybe that first half was the best first half we played, other than the Kentucky at home first half, when we held them to 27 points and, we were up 14 or whatever it was against them. But we've got to have a mentality that we got to finish. We can't come back out and just say, okay, we're up 13. We're going to rest on our laurels and think that the other team's not going to get after you and come back. I think that has to be the mindset, that you got to play the full 40.
Well, we'll see what happens Wednesday night. Got a couple of days of practice there, and then Vandy will head up to Lexington. Safe travels, by the way, Tim. Hopefully you guys don't get too snowed in to where y'all can actually make it up to Lexington. But good luck on the call, and appreciate you taking the time.
Thanks, Billy. Appreciate it.
All right. That's Tim Thompson, color analyst for Vanderbilt men's basketball. Does a really good job there with Kevin Ingram every game. Again, you can hear him pregame, 30 minutes before every game as well. Vanderbilt and Kentucky coming up on Wednesday. That is a 6:00 tip-off. So earlier tip-off on the SEC network up there in Lexington. And we're supposed to get some bad weather rolling in tomorrow night into Wednesday. So hopefully the travel situation is all sorted out. I'm sure they're working hard to figure that out right now. But for Vanderbilt, it's go time. I mean, it's not desperation mode for this team, but this Kentucky game is an interesting spot in the schedule. Number one, like I mentioned, that I made sure that was one of my first questions to Tim. If Lamont Butler and Jackson Robinson don't play, what kind of a shot do you give Vanderbilt? I give Vanderbilt a great shot. I think somebody put this on the board too. Their guards that would be in place of Robinson and Butler would be a couple of freshmen, Travis Perry and Trent Noah. And you'd imagine that a veteran senior like an A.J. Hogarth and another veteran like a Jason Edwards, another veteran, a couple other veterans, Nickel and Collins, could hold their own against those guys. And we'll see what happens. But that'd be a huge one to steal if you're Vanderbilt. And then maybe you create some momentum heading into Saturday's game against Ole Miss. I mean, that'd be massive to kind of steal a couple of wins here. And then you only need one in the final 4 or 5 games, I think. So, it's still in front of this team. Everything's still in front of this team. We're going to talk a lot more basketball tomorrow. By the way, note on tomorrow, trying to figure out the Real Deal podcast schedule. I think we may have to push this week's scheduled Real Deal podcast to next week. Had some scheduling conflicts with a couple of our guests. So tomorrow will likely just be a normal Vandy247 live podcast. So we'll still hop on tomorrow at 10 a.m. Maybe get Joey Dwyer in here. We'll get somebody on. But we will be here tomorrow at 10 a.m. I do want to mention, as we wrap up here, Michaela Blake's 55 points. She broke her own record, SEC freshman record. I mean, all kinds of different records being thrown around this season for her. She scored 30 of her 55 points in the final 6 minutes of the fourth quarter and overtime. I was watching the end of that. My goodness. I mean, she was unbelievable. And a lot of her shots did not hit rim. You know, it's about all 3 free throws, like I mentioned, didn't hit rim. And man, she's just unbelievable. I thought, you know, Camille Pierre played really well. She's the only player, Michaela Blakes is, in women's basketball this season with multiple 50-point games. She led Vandy to multiple ranked wins for the first time since 2016. She helped Vandy earn a top 25 ranking for the first time in 11 seasons. I mean, this is a historical season for Vanderbilt men's basketball. Well, men's basketball too, but women's basketball particularly. Of course, Blake setting the NCAA single game scoring record for a freshman, true or redshirt. And I mean, she made 23 straight free throws. It's just unbelievable. There's all kinds of different stats on this game. You know, all kinds of Vandy fans tweeting. You got to imagine Vanderbilt will be able to keep her on campus. But this is the one I was looking for. Michaela Blake scored 55 points for Vanderbilt yesterday. She also played the entire game, so she never came out. The last NBA, WNBA, or D1 men's or women's player to score 55-plus points while playing every second of the game was LeBron James at Toronto in 2005 with 56 points, and he played the entire game. It's pretty special. I mean, that is pretty special for Michaela Blake. So big win for them on the road at Auburn for the women's team. So they're going to try to keep it rolling here in their push for the tournament. They'll be in the tournament. They're not as desperate as the men, but the men will get in. This men's team will get in that one way or another. And again, the VandyBoys. We'll probably talk again. I'm going to try to get Joey on tomorrow. We'll probably talk a lot more VandyBoys. He had a piece out on Riley Nelson. How about Riley Nelson's big home run yesterday to lift them over a good UC Irvine team? By the way, speaking of good, there were good teams Vandy played all weekend. Played a really good top 25 Nebraska team that came out firing. The Swanson kid had like every RBI in that game. Vandy's pitching struggled a little bit. Ethan McElvain wasn't at his best. Cyber wasn't at his best particularly. And then even yesterday against UC Irvine, pitching struggled a little bit. I did think Cody Bowker was tremendous. He might have even been better than Thompson on Friday. Bowker was great. Shorey in relief. Squeezed or not, you know, he's a freshman, right? They pitched a few freshmen yesterday. And they're trying to get the freshman reps. That's what you do. That's what Corbin does in these games. And, you know, especially when they play these West Coast teams. But to go 2-1 against 3 good teams, 3 teams that could be in regionals, maybe one of them hosts, maybe a couple of those teams are supers. We don't know, but we know they're good teams. Friday's win at Grand Canyon was impressive. To go in there, play with some moxie and some swagger, and take them down was huge. And then I know they lost Saturday to Nebraska, but man, that Nebraska team's pretty good. And then yesterday, wild game. Those Sunday games in these tournaments are always nuts. I thought the pitching was overall on the weekend was really good. So we'll talk more baseball tomorrow as well. Willie chimes in. The men need to get in touch with the women's trainer. We get fatigued playing 20 minutes, and Blake's is setting records playing every second. Yeah, I mean, you know, Blake's is. I really do think so, and maybe this is an off-season topic, but I mean, she's starting to go down as one of the better athletes in Vanderbilt history. I mean, it's her second time scoring 50 points this year. There's not a single men's player that's done that. I mean, she could be national freshman of the year. I mean, she could be up for player of the year. Like, who knows? I mean, you know, she's putting this team on her back. So, yeah, I think that's a fair point, Willie. But maybe not a new trainer for the men's team. But you know, they'll get some good talent in there before it's over with. But I thought Tim was great. I thought, you know, Tim talked about the leads they've had in the first half this season. 45 points per game in the second half against SEC teams this year for the men's team. So they've got Kentucky Wednesday night, 6:00 SEC Network, and we'll see what happens. And then they've got Ole Miss on Saturday. But successful weekend for Vanderbilt women's basketball and the baseball team. they couple of comeback wins yesterday that were really impressive. 2-1 in Phoenix for the VandyBoys, and the women's team hangs on to beat Auburn. They're now 6-6 in SEC play. Vandy trying to get to 6-7 now all of a sudden. So we'll see what happens Wednesday night. Big thanks to Tim Thompson, Vanderbilt basketball color analyst, for joining today. Tomorrow, going to hope to try to get Joey Dwyer. If not, we'll get somebody on and we'll talk a little baseball as well as some basketball. This podcast has always been free. We plan for it to stay that way. Here's how you can help. Give us a review and a 5-star rating. That helps us get noticed. If you're listening and haven't subscribed to Vandy247.com yet, please do. We've got a sale going on right now, 30% off an annual VIP membership. That's 30% off an annual VIP membership. The annual deal is down from $9.95 to $6.27 a month for a year. You'll be billed $75, or you can do monthly, $9.95, then $9.95 a month. So you'll be billed $9.95 a month. So you can either do the annual or the monthly deal. You'll get inside scoop on Vanderbilt, expert analysis and opinion from all of our team. You can read all content across the 24/7 Sports Network. You can access other boards from other teams. You can access Vanderbilt Commodore insiders like Robbie Weinstein, Joey Dwyer, myself, Chris Lee, and exclusive recruiting coverage from Robbie himself and Justin Angel as well. So looking forward to keeping this thing rolling. We'd love to hear your feedback. If you have any comments or questions on any of that, subscribe to our YouTube channel right here, Vandy247. That is free. Like this video, give us a comment. We'd love to interact with you. Super chats. And my apologies. I've not been able to figure out how to make these monetize, but I did figure out today's. So we're going to try to keep that rolling. Also, if you're interested in sponsoring the show, email Chris Lee at chrislee70@gmail.com. Thanks for listening. We'll catch you again soon with more episodes.